This video is sponsored by Sleeve Chief, who have a new collection dropping at 9 a.m. PST or noon EST as this video goes up. It is their Lunar Shadow collection, which includes a deck box, a playmat, binder, storage box, metal dice, and others that we can see here on the screen as well. So make sure to check it out. You can also check out the other items they have on their website too. And if you do want to get anything, make sure to use my coupon code the Eggman at checkout for additional 5% off. So make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we've got a top 32 breakdown for the booster boxes Virginia Regionals from this past weekend. They had over 800 players, 10 rounds of Swiss, and best of 1 to a top 32 cut, best of 3, and honestly, this was a really good event. There's a lot of different deck lists I want to go over, and I just want to kind of jump on into it. So real quick before we do, if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We make a lot of content for the One Piece card game, and then also if you want to see any of the deck lists that we're talking about today are from this event in general, or just any event in the OP10 meta, you can find them on my website, Eggman Events, which is behind me. It's linked to the description, and we do have just a bunch of data for events that have happened already this weekend. We have a bunch of different deck lists from like ranked play, my own deck list from me and my team, and it's just a really good resource that we spend a lot of time keeping as up to date as possible. So make sure to check it out if you haven't already, and let's just jump on into it. So this happened this weekend, April 12th to 13th. It was a 2-day event, 850 players, 10 rounds of Swiss best of 1 as mentioned to a top 32 cut best of 3. They did also live stream it, so make sure to check that out. We've got day 1 and 2 on the page, and it's also in the description if you guys want to check out some of the games from this one. And in the top 32, we did have 6 Doflamingos, 5 copies of Marshall.D.Teach, 4 Shanks, 3 of the Purple Luffy, 3 Zoro, 3 Usopp, 3 of the Lucci, and then singles of Katakuri, Nami, Reiju, Bonney, and Boa. So again, a good amount of variety. We have 12 different leaders in this top 32, which I think is quite remarkable. And even the leaders that are here, that's pretty good on a spread of it as well. Also, I don't currently have the full leader breakdown for this event. If that changes, I'll make sure to add it to the website, and also probably add a pinned comment in the comments too. Normally I try to get that information if possible, but it is a little bit trickier, but depending on the event as well. So don't have it for this one, but you guys can see the other 2 events from the same weekend, and they're likely kind of similar based on that those data points too. So we are going to go over the top placing leader for each one of these decks as well. So we're going to check all those, and then just again, if you guys want to see any individual lists, you can find them all on the page here. But we're going to start off with first place, which is Young Cash Register's version of Purple Luffy. And Purple Luffy is one of the decks that I think just got a big boon from the restriction list in the fact that it didn't get hit at all, and 2 of its harder matchups where Dofi and Lucci did definitely get hit as well. So it made, I think, the Doflamingo matchup from just a very difficult matchup to, I think, something more approachable. And then Lucci, I think it means that we can more consistently play our Luffy Taros, and one of the cards, if not both of them, are going to stick. And even if one of the cards gets removed, it's usually the 5 or 4 cost played off the Luffy Taro, not the 7 cost, which I think is impactful. So I do think this deck is a little bit dice rolly. It does really prefer to go first in some matchups, but it is something that I think is mildly adaptable. It has a lot of power, and if you high roll with the deck, you're in a really good spot. So there's not a lot of, I'd say, tech cards for this version compared to other ones that I've seen. I think Gamma Knife is pretty much standard at this point at 1 or 2 copies. It's been very, very good. Gum Gum Giant is just one of the best cards for this deck. It just means that you kind of get like a get out of free jail card. You get to be very aggressive as long as you leave 1 Dawn open, which is really strong for this current format, and then just a good amount of blockers and just other straw hats. So I don't have much more to say. Congratulations to Young Cash Register for their finish with the Purple Luffy. The next up, we've got Yost with their version of Shanks. I think Shanks has been pretty dominant as the most popular leader in this current format. I think it is a safe choice because it is just a deck that has a lot of good matchups, or at least evenish matchups, so you never feel like there's a matchup that it can't go your way, right? There are some bad matchups, but they are a little bit rare. I also think Shanks is a deck that has a lot of different builds and has a lot of build diversity. I think in this one by Yost, the big thing to notice is, 1, we aren't playing any searchers. I know a lot of people who try to run searchers either for consistency or say, you know what, this deck is inconsistent as it is. I'd rather add more good cards instead of just having, you know, a searcher take up a time and add that kind of inconsistency. There's also the issue where some of our best cards in this deck aren't searchable anyways. That includes the Silver's Rayleigh, which if this card was searchable, I think Shanks would just be a way better deck, but without it right now, it is a little bit encumbered by it. Dragon's also a really great card on 8 as well. to just add some pressure and can also do some more removal. And then Goldie Roger, I think, is a bit more of a tech choice. It's not a bad card, and I think just the fact that this card exists means that some people will be playing around it, whether or not you run it, since they don't know that information. And you do have to be careful against playing against Shanks and setting them to 0 because this card exists as well. So otherwise, I think this has just been one of the more standard builds for it. I think Red Hawk is either people love this card or they hate it. The fact that this does give you a bit of a get out of jail free card as a trigger for the one of your last lives, if your opponent's not expecting it, that can be really helpful. It can also be some removal and defense, and especially if you go second, if your opponent plays like a 1-drop, you can like Red Hawk. It kind of makes your opponent have to sequence differently whenever you leave 2 Dawn open, whether again you're playing Red Hawk or not. So last thing I'll say is that we do get some good generic red cards in the Sanji, the Tony Chopper, as well as the Monkey.D.Luffy from Star Deck 21. These have all just been generically really good red cards, and Shanks can definitely take advantage of it. So not much more to say. Congratulations to Yost for their finish with Shanks. The next up, we've got Doflamingo. So this is 707's version, who got top 4 with this build. Dofi's done a pretty good job, I think, for transitioning from the restriction list. We lost Jimbei, which honestly is probably the strongest hit for the deck without making it incompatible for the current meta. I do think that Jimbei did let you kind of high roll a lot of times, where just being able to play 2 4-drops on turn 2 without active means that unless you're playing against a high removal deck, you're just being able to chip out a lot of damage in a lot of situations. It also even means like late game, where you kind of need to stick 2 bodies on board, or even 1 body on board, to be able to kind of pressure for that last damage you need to. Jimbei can't do that because it's not here anymore. So I think that kind of makes Dofi a little bit more fair. I think this is still a very viable deck, but it does lose a little bit of power and a little bit of that high roll potential without the addition of Jimbei. So one thing that people are putting into the deck, I think more consistently right now, are just kind of removal events. So Red Hawk, I've seen it usually like 2 to 4 copies. We're running the full 4 in this build. We also see 3,000 Worlds, which has been a little bit of an off-meta choice for this one, but I do think there's so many different 5 costs that are important in this meta. The Red Luffy we talked about. There's also the Lucky Roo, which is a 4 cost, but also like the Smoker for the green 5 cost Smoker. There's just a lot of decks that just conveniently play very strong 5-drops that this just lets you get in range right now, right? We do have like the Trafalgar Law that lets us get rid of 4 costs. We do also have the Jozu, which gets rid of 6 costs, so being able to have like kind of that sweet spot is really good. So only thing I don't like about this card is the trigger gets rid of a 3 or less, which I would be pretty happy if it was a 4 or less, but it's kind of the balance you have to choose with a card like this. So, and honestly, sometimes this can hit like 3-drop Sanji, which is still very relevant, or can be very good against like more aggressive decks as well. So other than that, you guys kind of know how Doflamingo works. I think it's still a very viable deck right now. You do have to be aware of what it does, and it can still just build a really quick board early game and apply a lot of pressure. So this is a build here from 707. Congratulations for their top 4 finish. And then next up, we've got Teach. So this is Lafinte, I believe. I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but their version of the deck here. We did go over some different builds this week from both the Pasadena regional as well as the one in London as well. And this is, I'd say, more of the standard build, right? And the fact that we are just running a lot of our Blackbeard Pirate cards, right? I think the only card that's not Blackbeard Pirate is Finger Pistol, which is just a really good card in Archetype, since it does let you get rid of a 5 or less, which again, we were saying like these 5 or lesses are a big milestone for removal right now. Putting more cards into our trash, which is really good. And the trigger effect also lets us get rid of a 5 or less. It is just kind of a bit of an overtuned card in this current meta. So we definitely love to see it in Teach right now. We do have like more consistency tools with the Lafayette. We also have my Era Begins and the Full Lead. And then the new Kuzan from OP10 has been a really great card to be able to just play out, apply a little pressure with it on the next turn, and then just go into the card we really want on board as well. So all that aside, I don't have much more to say about Teach specifically. It's definitely a very player-centric deck instead of a build-centered deck, in my opinion. You still have some choices for some tech cards and what cards you want to run, but specifically speaking, like Teach is kind of a known quantity. It's kind of, I kind of honestly think it's similar to how like BY Luffy's been in the past, where you are kind of doing something different than most decks in the game, and if your opponent can get around your kind of effects, you are in a bad spot, but you have to just know what your opponent's outs are and just kind of play around them. So I think that, Teach is obviously very strong right now, very popular deck right now. And congratulations to Lafinte for their finish with Teach. Then next up, we've got Zoro. So this is Sun Nick's version of the deck here. And I've been seeing a good amount of variety in Zoro builds right now. I'd say that we have like on one side, like the more traditional kind of Rush Zoro build, which has been kind of popular since like OP02, OP03. We also have like the more like new wave version of it with like the animal package, which I'd say this one leans a little bit towards, but it is kind of still in the middle of both builds. The reason I say that is that we do have a couple more Rush cards than usual, right? We do have the copies of Kid and Killer, which can still be a really good closer. We do also have the Monkey.D. Dragon, which is just a really great Rush card, but it is a little bit expensive, and also a single copy of Goldie Roger, which I normally wouldn't expect for a deck like this, especially one that's able to play Jimbei. But sometimes you are just 10'd on and you are able to like just play the card out early. So even if you're not applying direct pressure to win the game, there's a lot of decks that just can't remove this card effectively, which is really strong. So other than that, we are playing, the animal package, I think, and inherently we are missing out on some targets for it because we do kind of have this hybrid build. So we're only playing the Tony Chopper 3-drop, 4 copies of Robson, 3 copies of the Chopper blocker, 4 copies of the Bear, and 3 copies of the 1-drop blocker. So a little bit less than average, but I think still enough for you to be able to run the Just Shut Up and Come With Us. We get some good effects from that, and we can still kind of high roll with that too. So again, just a very good hybrid build, especially if you don't know what kind of deck this is going into it. You might be surprised by some of the cards that are being played, and it's hard to kind of play around it. So last thing I'll say is that the Mole Pistol has been just a very strong card for red in general. It does let you get out of some kind of tricky scenarios with how flexible the card is, and it is just a really good tech card for a deck like this one as well. So only issue with this is that we don't generally end the turn with a lot of 6Ks on our own board, so the trigger effect is a little bit harder to run and use effectively compared to something like a Jet Pistol, but this is still, I think, a very solid card and would be the one that I would pick as well. So this is again the build from Sun Nick, and congratulations for their finish with Zoro. The next up, we've got Usopp. So this is Minipro's version of the deck, and Usopp's been kind of up in the air for a lot of people. I think some people think the deck is fantastic. I think a lot of people think the deck is bait, and my thoughts still is that it's still a good deck, right? I'm not surprised that it topped multiple events this weekend. It is a deck that does get a lot of advantage. It's still, I think, a little bit matchup skewed, and there are some minor consistency issues, not necessarily because we don't have a lot of search power, but mostly because we have so many different cards that we have to find to be optimal, right? Like even just our early game, we do want to try to find the Coliseum as soon as possible. That means that also, Leo's helpful to be able to find that, as also Rebecca. We also do kind of prefer to go first. We do have some game plan choices if we do go second, but first is probably optimal, especially if we are able to find any combination of Leo, Rebecca, or the Coliseum. We do have some great ways to take advantage of the 7-drop Rebecca. This is a very good card in this deck to be able to just kind of sweep the board to your advantage by being able to play 2 additional bodies. And especially since like there's some weird times where Rebecca actually does attack after you play it, because you can attack with it with Coliseum. I think Kyros is a really great card to be able to, even without Rebecca, this can kind of get like a double removal in a lot of times and then stay on the board as a 7-drop 9K, which in most decks is a really difficult kind of number to get rid of. So I think that's something that will stay on the board after played most of the time. And then we also have the 7-drop Luffy from OP04. This is kind of a card that does let you get around some matchups. I think it is really good with the Blackbeard matchup because you are able to attack into Kuzans, or even sometimes you are able to attack and remove the Burgess as well. So that's something that I think playing 1 or 2 copies makes sense with it. And then we are playing 4 copies of the King Kong gun. I originally didn't think that this was a really good card for the deck because I felt like getting to 15 cards in trash was a little bit expensive and not super consistent. But generally speaking, the biggest reason I like playing this card is because we play so many of these 1-drops that, due to our leader ability to let us draw cards whenever they get KO'd, as long as we have 5 or less cards in hand, your opponents just usually let them stay on board. And so because of that, it means that we can turn this into an 8K attacker for 3 Dawn, which is absurd. And if we do have like the addition to make it double strike, that can just be a really good conversion for us. So I think that's something that's very strong, and something that we have to take in account whenever we play this matchup, is that anything can convert into damage very quickly, which is a little bit intimidating. So I don't have much more to say. I think Usopp's still going to be pretty relevant in this meta. I've also seen some other builds that are more on like the Sakazuki build, which you can check out on the London video that I made the other day. But I think we're just going to stop it on this version of Usopp for this one. So again, thank you, or congratulations to Minipro for their finish with Usopp on this one. The next up, we've got Katakuri, which this is Jimbei's version of the deck here, and I honestly wasn't expecting to see Katakuri from this one. It's kind of been like, there's two decks from OP10. There's Katakuri and Nami, which, spoilers, we're going to talk about Nami in a little bit, that just are not the worst decks in the game, right? They're just always like weirdly relevant. They're cards that just kind of put some decks into check. And especially Katakuri, there's some days that you can just roll really high since you are very trigger based. There's just times where you're able to get the triggers at the right time, where it gets you a little bit more tempo. If you hit something like an early copy of Pero Sparrow or also the Satori, if your opponent doesn't respect that, something like Nami can be in your life, you can get some good advantage there. And it just sometimes can win because of that too. I do think it's a matchup that, or it has a bad matchup into Blackbeard, since we do have a bit of an issue getting our high-end cards activating both on-play effects. That, I mean, playing a 10-drop 12k is good generically, but Blackbeard, I think, just, you know, without having the on-play effect, it doesn't really do that much in this current meta. So I think that this is still a really strong deck. Your opponent kind of has to play around it, and there's kind of like this wave of times where people kind of forget to respect or how to play against yellow or Katakuri-like decks, and because of that, they give you a lot of free advantage or play it incorrectly, and then they, once it gets more popular, people recognize it, gets a little bit worse, and then it comes back up. So I think this is, at the beginning of a format like this one, where people are still kind of figuring out their decks. They're playing slightly suboptimal builds as they're still figuring it out. Something that's been tried and true, like Katakuri, can get these tops that we've been seeing these last couple weeks. So this is the build here from Jimbei, and congratulations for their top with Katakuri. The next up, we've got Nami, as mentioned before. This is a build here from Biglamma. Now, this is the second Nami list I'm going over this weekend. We did have Adam on the Core TCG Pasadena Regionals get first place with their build and go undefeated. And Nami's kind of like in a weird spot right now. There's kind of like this divide where most decks are either kind of like very control, slow heavy, or they're very fast and aggressive, right? And so Nami's really good into, I think, half the meta, but then kind of really bad into the other half. I do think the same thing as like Katakuri, where Nami, you have to play against the deck very specifically, and if you don't, you get a lot of free advantage by your opponent doing some kind of suboptimal plays and sequencing. Something also that I see in this build compared to the build from Adam that he was able to, again, get his first place finish with, we are leaning more into kind of like the Amazon Lily stuff. So we are playing the Marguerite. We're also playing the Boa Sanderson, which is essentially just a searchable 2k for this deck, since we are playing the Gloriosa. We all are also playing the Menace in My Dreams. It is the Usopp Rush card. This, I'm sure, just can get some random wins against some spots if your opponent's not expecting it. This being able to say, oh, you know what, well, I can invest like 7 Dawn, and if your opponent's really at a low hand size or doesn't respect this Usopp, you can just do a lot of damage with it and catch your opponent by surprise. So other than that, kind of the event lineup we expect: Impel Down All Stars, Rubber Band, Spada, Gavel, Snake Dance, White Snake, Love Mellow, as well as Sanji's Peel Off. So nothing too absurd. I do think like the 1-drop Nami is still a really good card in this format. It's the newest point of support for this deck, with it coming out in OP09. And I think this is just it can be really solid in this meta because of so many decks that are kind of on the slower side, but can be, again, scary when you're playing some of the aggressive decks like Zoro or Doflamingo, which we talked about earlier. So again, this is Biglamma's build, and congratulations for their finish with Nami. The next up, we've got Rob Lucci, and we've got 3 Rob Lucci lists in the top 32 who all got a top 32 finish. So we've got the build here from Dino, we've got Elijah's build, as well as the build from Colt Snap. And one thing that you might notice already is that these are 3 pretty diverse builds. There are a lot of decision points, I think, for a lot of this one. This one, I think, is like mostly like just the build that we're used to in OP09, and just replacing the cards we lost with Gecko Moria and Ice Age. Specifically speaking, we are adding like 2 copies of Soap Sheep, which can be really good for getting rid of 2 4-drops in conjunction with our Rob Lucci. We are also playing Finger Pistol, which I think this is just a really good card. It does stink that we're not able to establish our own body, but this is still a really good card out of life. A lot of the time, most decks aren't playing like any protection, and the fact that, again, 5-drops and lower are very relevant in this meta. This hits a lot of key cards, so I think that's strong, and puts cards into our trash, which I think is a bit more of a resource in this current meta right now. So that is for specifically Rob Lucci too. I think that's something important. We are running a good amount of additional ways to put cards into our trash. We're also playing 4 copies of Spandine, which I never see more than 2 copies of it, so it's really interesting to see the full 4. We have our reduction with Hina. We have our removal and reduction with Brook, and then we are also playing Laboon as well to get some additional cost reduction to get things in range. We are also playing the which honestly, like, one kind of neat thing is that you have to make sure that you respect how good I think Teach is. And right now in this current meta, I think Lucci actually has a better matchup into Teach than it generally would if Gecko Moria was around. We have a lot of ways to get to removal for specifically the 10-drop Teach. So if we have something like Laboon plus Leader Effect plus Pistol, that does get rid of a 10 cost, which is really helpful. We also have Kaido, which Kaido with Leader Effect with something like either Soap Sheep, or if we can play Tempest Kick, that also gets the removal, which is really strong. And Jack does kind of get the removal if we have the activate main on the next turn available to us, but like if you play it early and they they don't use the Teach effect for it, but using 3 and then an additional 2 Tempest Kicks, which is like a little bit expensive, but if you have it, and you get the removal, I think that can be very strong too. So generally speaking, I think there's just a lot of ways that Lucci can get some sneaky removals, and even without Gecko Moria and Ice Age. So, and then we've got this build here from, again, Elijah. One key difference, I think, is that we aren't running the Kaido, which I personally like that card a lot. I think it's really strong in this format, but I understand not running it. We are also playing the 2-drop Uta from Star Deck 8. I've been seeing this card get a lot more popular in recent times, specifically because this does give a -2 cost on play or on activate main, so you do get around like Teach effects, but also the fact that this can only be KO'd by battle against something that isn't a leader means that some decks just really can't effectively get rid of this early, and you can get some cool little advantage. Like if you play this on 2, you can do something where like you immediately tap it and play Brook, and then if you remove the only card on your opponent's board, they can't just attack into it with leader to remove it. You usually get some kind of protection because of it. So I think that's something that's strong, and it can help out the deck a lot. And it's been really cool to see that as kind of more of a tech card as well. And then also to finalize, we've got Quilt's version, which is kind of a hybrid between those two, right? We are playing a couple copies of Uta. We are playing the Kaido as well. Just a good amount of removal. You're not playing Laboon in this version. And it's just been really cool. Like, Rob Lucci, I think, is the one deck that has the biggest kind of playground to play with right now, where you have to kind of reimagine what this deck looks like without Moria and Ice Age. And it's been really cool to see all these different builds kind of pop up where people identify which cards they think are good. I think there's just a huge card pool for Black that is just viable cards, and there's just a lot to choose from. So again, these are the builds from Dino, Elijah, and Colt Snap, and congratulations for their respective finishes with Rob Lucci. The next up, we've got Reiju. So this is the build here from Feels Dan Man, and Reiju's got a good amount of support from the set, specifically from the 1-drop Vinsmoke Sanji. It's not a fancy card, but it does look top 5 for something including Germa, which this kind of support and searchability is something the deck really needs. You are just a deck based on finding your pieces, so another piece to find a piece is really good. Also, most people are still on the Porsche package, which I think is correct because we do additionally have this new 2K with this Foxy. Activate main, you can trash this character if the number of Dawn cards on your field is equal to or less than the Dawn on your opponent's field. You get to draw a card, so if you really need to find an extra card, that draw can be really, really nice. We have some additional 2Ks in the Kaya as well, and also the Cosette, which is just a blocker if needed. Tony Chopper is still a really good blocker for this deck because it does become a blocker and give you a Dawn back if you need that, especially because you can play it off the Porsche. And then we are just running the 2 Reiju and Ichi. I think those are generally the best ones in this current format, specifically because hitting a 4 cost with the other one doesn't really do a lot. I think 5 costs again are kind of like the removal threshold for it, so without that you're kind of in a bad spot. And we are running some events with Germa 66, the Gamma Knife, which again I think is most purple decks should probably play this card. It can get you a lot of good advantage in a lot of situations, as well as the Red Rock for like a super big removal against something like 10-drop Teach or like the 8-drop Kid, which I think are just solid cards for this format for you to try to remove. So other than that, I think this deck is moderately viable. It's not one that I haven't tested currently, but I know there's a lot of diehard Reiju fans, and this is, I think, a format where it's not going to be uncommon for you to be able to top with the deck, which I think is really cool. So this is again the build from Feels Dan Man, and congratulations for their top 32 with Reiju. The next up, we've got Bonney, and this is JP's version of the build. And honestly, I think Bonney is one of the decks where people are still kind of figuring out if it's good or not, specifically because it did get a lot of like incidental support with the additions of the Tashigi, which has just been very strong, as well as the Smoker. Smoker Smoker being able to just give you one Dawn every turn is great for you having one Dawn up for your leader effect, and then Tashigi just offering that protection. Specifically, if you play it on 3 Dawn and your opponent doesn't answer it, you can play a 5-drop safely without any removal potential, or at least easy removal potential with that, which I think is really good. So other than that, we do have again a suite of 5-drops. We've got the Carrot, we've got the Bonney, we've got the Cavendish, some pretty standard cards for this deck. We are also able to play a good amount of top end cards. Hody Jones is still the best finisher in this game right now. It's super good. A lot of decks kind of depend on having some Dawn open or having some blockers up, so being able to interact with that is great. There's are also some weird times where you don't mind taking the life if you need that extra card draw. We also do have the Kid and the Shanks, which are just great late game cards too. Shanks being able to get some good removal, and then 2 copies of Dofi in case you need to kind of buy another turn before you're ready to go all in with, again, likely your Hody Jones. So other than that, we are running some unusual blockers in the U Rouge. Obviously, this was a card that released in OP10 with Bonney, but I've been seeing less and less played just because it's usually pretty easy to interact with this card, but I don't think it's a bad card to play if you find some room for it. And then also Bart, this one's been a little bit more common, right? You are able to get a card draw by using a 1-drop event, or also by using your Captain Kid, as long as it was on the board first. So it can kind of get you some more draw. I know a lot of people are also playing Killer, the 2-drop blocker, which can potentially get you some card draw, but generally speaking, that card gets removed before you get it. So I don't have much more to say. This is the build here from JP. Congratulations for being our sole Bonney finisher in this top 32. And then to wrap it up, we've got Tom with their version of Boa Hancock. And I honestly think that Boa is more affected by the Jimbei ban than Doflamingo. I do think this deck kind of needed you to play 2 bodies out to be able to get some control aspects, right? If you spend your entire turn playing Red Rock or Raging Tiger, those cards are really only helpful if you already have a board of things to do. So without Jimbei kind of presenting 2 bodies at the same time, it's a little bit tougher for that to be true at the same time. But we do get a lot of cycle. We do get potentially a lot of consistency by having cards like Buggy and Sengoku. We do also have, again, the new tool with Kyros, which is great for this deck. Being able to return something to hand means you do activate your leader effect. A lot of people are on this 10-drop Kaido, which I do think without Gecko Moria, getting rid of an 8 cost and a 3 cost does become a little bit more relevant than usual. So this is I think a really good effect for this current meta. And 10-drop 12k is a menace to kind of deal with as well. So I don't have much more to say. I do kind of like adding the 7-drop Dofi in this deck too, just because it is searchable off the Sengoku, and it can remove some higher cost cards as well. But it is, I don't think it's a mandatory have if you already feel happy enough with your Boa and your Kyros too. So again, I think this is a really strong deck. You do have some really great ways to kind of curve out on turn 1, you play Sengoku and Buggy. Turn 2, you play Trafalgar Law to bounce one of those 1-drops back and whatever your opponent played last turn. Jozu, the same thing, bouncing back the other 1-drop and whatever your opponent played that previous turn. And then you can kind of end it with a Kyros or a Boa into then the Kaido or something like that. So again, you get to offer yourself a lot of protection. Every time you remove something like that, you get to draw a card as long as your hand size is small enough. And I think this can be a pretty deadly deck if that happens. So not much more to say, but congratulations to Tom for their finish with Boa. And then that's going to be it for this event. Again, if you guys want to see any of the deck lists from this one or many others, you can find them linked in the description on Eggman Events. Thank you again to the Booster Box for running this event, for also live streaming it, and for helping me get this data. I really do appreciate it, and I don't have much more else to say. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all next time.
Damn it. Damn it.